Well, a very warm welcome. It's on. A very warm welcome, everybody, to our District Development Committee meeting, and welcome to our guests. Call for apologies. We have apologies from Mayor Helen, Councillors Quarry and Bell. Any other apologies? Someone like to move they be approved? Thank you, Councillor Short and Councillor Belsky. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, carried. Thank you. Now we have the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 25th of May. Would someone like to move the minutes be approved as a true and correct record? Thank you, Councillor Blackmore.
Move that the minutes of the District Development Committee meeting held 25th of May 2023 be adopted as a true and correct record. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor McFadden. Any discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, carried. Any declarations of interest, matters we're discussing today? No presentations or late items. So we move on to section 7, officer reports. 7.1, smart community wellbeing, providing services for age-friendly communities of the future in the Manawatu. Very interesting report, and we'll call on our General Manager Community.
Thank you, Michael. I will actually call on Janine to introduce this paper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to welcome the Manawatu Community Trust as well as Manchester House Social Services, who will come to speak to the report, which is part of the order paper for today, and they have a presentation which they'd like to take members through.
We're looking forward to it. Thanks very much, Janine. Please come and join us at the table. 18, page 18, yes. Welcome to you all from both groups.
Thank you. So I'm going to do a bit of the talking on the slides today, but Anne and David particularly might want to jump in because we have been working on this together. So I'd just like to start by thanking the council for funding this project, and just to recognise it as a collaborative between Manchester House, ourselves and Manawatu District Council. So the report, I know that you have seen it, and it is long and it's academic, and I don't intend to talk to the whole report, but I thought it might be useful just to talk to some particular parts of it that refer to the outcomes and the future actions that we have planned as a result of it. Trick to this. Oh, there it is, it's upside down. So the aim of the report was around exploring wellbeing services in the future, and in particular digital wellbeing services and in-person services as well. There were 4 methods used. There was a literature review, there was some population profiling, there was identification of already existing community groups that provide wellbeing services, and there was interviewing adults that were around 60 to 80-year-olds and what services they would need in the future. And it's that particular last section of the interviews that's informed most of the actions, in fact, that we're proposing going forward. So the literature review identified a range of challenges in the future, and some of those aren't core things that we would particularly look at necessarily, you know, roading and flooding and those kind of infrastructure challenges. But increasing older population is one that definitely is of concern to us, and also the impact on housing affordability, with two probably key ones that formed a theme for our action plans going forward. There was some population profiling, which again, lots of things that you will all already be familiar with in terms of that ageing population and what that means for the community. I think it triggered some pretty good discussion with our group as well, particularly the increasing engagement with this section of research participants and what that will mean. And one of the things that didn't come out in the report that we think will be important to us in the future is the sort of social polarisation that happens with increased use of internet, and because our complexes are quite close and already managing sort of neighbours' well-being is a key feature, that potentially there'll be some impacts around that for us. And also the things we already know about around security and the fears that older adults have around using the internet generally. And another thing that was something I hadn't thought about before also was changes in household composition and ethnicity, and how we needed to incorporate that into our services and our thinking and our policies going forward. There was, you would have seen in the research report, a whole range of services provided by NGOs in this community. There's lots, and that's a really good thing. And I guess the one thing to note about that is many of them were provided by volunteer workforce. So that's, you know, provides some lots of opportunity, but also some risks as our population ages as to how they may be managed going forward.
Just a question, if I may, on that point. I've always felt that our community was strong in community organisations, etc., volunteers, etc. Is that just is that based on anything factual, or is it just my impression? Basically, how does that list of all the organisations in our community compare perhaps to others in perhaps larger cities or other communities around the country? Is there any comment on that?
Yeah, no, I can't really comment, to be honest, except that I thought from that research and whether the two academics that wrote that paper had better insight into that or not, they seemed to endorse that there was a good variety and number of NGOs. So yeah, I couldn't personally comment.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Once I go, I can make a point,
David.
that a lot of volunteer groups like churches and the service groups, anecdotally, if you look at the age group of those, are getting a lot older, more secular. If you look at church congregations, they're sort of getting the 60s, 70s and 80s. And you go on to the service groups like the Lions, who do that midwinter Christmas dinner for the old people. From observation, they're older than the people they're looking after. So I think it's something you're going to have to watch, Michael, because our volunteers may be dropping off because a lot of those groups are getting quite old.
Just an observation, supporting what you're saying, if you look at the service organisations, you know, we used to have JCs, Kiwanis, Roundtable, probably others as well that I've forgotten. There's not too many of those left, and yet the Probus is incredibly strong at the upper age group, and seems to be a trend which could be of concern going forward. Yeah, Councillor Short.
Thank you. I was involved with Inga and Caroline's previous project in rural smart health, and they went around communities all around the North and South Island. So if I would envisage that if they say that Manawatu is well served, that they have compared to other rural communities.
Thank you.
Done.
Both Teresa and I have worked in the health sector prior to this, and I would say that the number of NGOs, etc., in this district is fairly similar to that in my experience in other districts,
Okay.
but with the same challenges in ageing and diminishing volunteer base. So sustainability is an issue.
Can I just say something from a Manchester House point of view? Yes, about the volunteers. A lot of our volunteers at the op shop are quite elderly. Volunteers in this day and age are very project or targeted with their volunteering, and that's something that we do really have to be using to the best of our advantage. The other point is from an NGO point of view, depending on the type of NGO, if you're looking at some of the groups who have minimal funding or no funding and are supported by their own members, or groups such as Manchester House, funding is a major issue in this point in time. To fund employees to an adequate level of wage and salary is really difficult. So going forward into the sector of older people, which I'll be in that sector, I would like to think that the likes of social services are well funded. I don't see that happening at the moment, but I think it's certainly something that research projects such as this and for councils and other and perhaps government agencies need to be looking at. So it's nice to see at the moment that the seniors in our society, funding is reasonably fashionable and funding is always around fashion. 5 years ago, funding for seniors was minimal, whereas now funding is a little bit easier to get. I'm hoping that perhaps 2030 onwards that we're looking at that seniors with the growth in obviously age cohort that will increase. Digitally, who knows? We'll just wait and see what happens. But I think it's certainly from a long-term plan from MDC, this is something we need to look at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, carry on. Sorry about the interruptions.
All right. So the next slide up there. So this table was developed from the interviews with the participants, and what it demonstrates is there was 4 sort of key areas of concerns: services, skills, spaces, and social connection that were identified from the interviews. And then going downwards of those lists, that's the order of priority in which services were a concern. So it surprised me, although not others necessarily, that transport was the #1 service of concern, followed by healthcare, housing, and communication. I'll talk about a few of these slides as we move on, but essentially skills, which is in the green there, they all relate to information technology and digital tech skills that were of concern. So that is a key focus of the objectives that we will be setting. So transport, just really a quick overview on that. It's around, the fear around that is the losing of the licence, and also not only the physical inability to be able to drive, but getting a driver's licence is kind of a rite of passage into adulthood and becoming independent, and so it's quite significant emotionally losing that licence as well. Healthcare services, not probably surprising that that's there generally the participants were concerned around the whole range of healthcare services and gaining access to them. What was maybe interesting, I thought, was that cost wasn't mentioned as a concern in relation to healthcare.
Councillor Short.
I would imagine that those over 65 who have a community services card would probably be getting their primary health heavily subsidised anyway.
Yeah, correct. So housing, yep, that's our core business. And so there was concern around cost, location, availability and choice of housing. And again, links to where that housing may be and the transport that might become an issue and, you know, continuing to live in their housing. But another thing that came out of the research was that generally a house will have a 60% chance of someone living in it with a disability over the period that that house is in existence. So it's just something to be mindful of when building houses, but I would say for our houses, it would be 100% chance that someone will have a disability at some point that lives in there. So communication, that was a concern, and there was a general feeling, I think, of some of those participants not feeling that they knew what was happening in the community. So it was that sort of broader sense of community rather than individual communications with people that was flagged as well. They were both flagged.
Can I just ask on the communication one? An organisation like council is often criticised for its lack of communication, etc. And yet I can assure you that there's a huge amount of effort does go in, and sometimes you could, doesn't matter what you do, people don't notice it because they're busy with their lives, whatever. Was there anything that came through that would be useful to us in terms of how we should be communicating? I mean, we use a range of mediums, including social media, etc.
Yeah.
But was there anything that came through strongly?
Yeah, I'd have to go and reread it with that lens, to be honest. But yes, I think there were some things that would be applicable, and in particular, the ways that people wanted to get together and communicate was not sort of the structured, typical ways that we may engage, not necessarily council, but in particular people may engage, and that's around setting a time and having an activity and people attending those activities with a specific purpose. There was quite a clear desire for people to have ad hoc kind of interactions and social spaces that they could call into and might just be an observer, but also might engage, and so that it was much more fluidity in the way that people received information on the times and terms that suited them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so digital technology, as I said, engaging in digital wellbeing was something that was important to most of the participants, and they were accepted that that was the way forward and that they would have to do that. Particularly we're keen in terms of monitoring and safety to use technology in those spaces. They had concerns around availability and being able to link and access internet, and also their skills that they had to be able to achieve that. Internet safety was a concern, and also so was accessing the right information, getting good information off the internet and not the wrong information.
Councillor Short.
I think from today and moving forward, the issues that we are seeing are really about accessing the information online and then responding to it. So emails, if accounts are sent out via email, how to access that accurately and respond. Certainly the issues that we are seeing as of the moment are for potential national superannuitants actually getting online and applying once they're 65. Now we're seeing quite a few people coming into Manchester House who are throwing up their hands in horror, and unfortunately work and income are not available to help them with their online applications. So 2030, we would hope that the age going forward will be more able, but these are things that we have to think about now as well as at that particular time. You know, having people come in very, very distressed because they're not getting good access. So going forward, how do we manage that, and how does MDC manage that as well? From a help desk point of view, I think is something that we need to be very cognizant of.
Thank you, Anne. Councillor Short.
Thank you. Were the respondents asked how they adapted to the phasing out of checkbooks and doing their banking online? Because I certainly know there's been a lot of families where one of the adult children has had to take over the payment of accounts and things because the elderly parent just could not manage.
No, that wasn't included in the research questions.
And also just that at the library, we do have digital champions.
Yes.
And that they will help with various things. And a good example is the when we all had to have the vaccine passes. I think at the height they were helping 150 people a day load the information onto their phones. So they are certainly there available to help.
I think people just, I think that advertising of that fact needs to be regular, constantly regular, because people do forget in a moment of panic at the moment. And that is something, you know, as you get older, I mean, there are a lot of other things going on in your world, you know, loss of control and dependence and all those sorts of things. So regular information coming out repetitively so that people, you know, can access those sort of services.
Thank you. Councillor Underwood.
Having said that, their chief concern was transport. So if they've got to go somewhere else for that information and that help, then again, you know, you've got to get them there.
Yep.
That's one of the reasons why we are proposing that we have a rural library van that goes around rural areas, that, you know, it's not just about lending library books, it's actually about helping people out in the districts as well as in Fielding. And the library staff do provide a confidential service for people, as you've described.
So spaces. So one of the things that came through was that the participants wanted the spaces to be a bit more fluid, so that and accessible, and also not only that spaces were the important thing, but that services could follow them wherever they were. So for example, if their mobility changed or they were having a health incident where they couldn't leave their unit, for example, they didn't want to be disengaged from whatever that service was, so that the importance of the actual physical space wasn't as important as this continuation of the service for them. They like the idea of drop-in spaces rather than having set bookings, which I think I just talked about. Multi-purpose spaces were important to them, and they recommended using existing spaces that were already comfortable and they felt welcomed into, such as cafes and pubs, where they didn't feel like an imposter, you know, going into for the first time or subsequent times. Access to training that left people feeling good about the interaction was raised. And also spaces where in-person and virtual activities could happen at the same time. So, so that, you know, people could participate virtually as well as, you know, with a group of people that were together participating. Yeah, and not being, going to groups and places and not being obligated or feeling obligated to participate. So for an example, being able to go to a knitting group just for the chat, even if you could no longer knit because your eyesight had gone, or you have arthritis, whatever it might be, was important as well. I've just got this final slide before we get to the actions. So social connection, again, I don't think it's a surprise that that was on there. And in-person interactions were important. The use of social prescribing, and there was some questions around what social navigators did and how they might be able to help as well. There was concern around the number of new people that were coming into the Manawatu community, and their reasons for coming here, and that was perceived as being to escape big cities and work from home and have a more reclusive lifestyle. Whether that's true or not, that was the perception. And you know, there was a fear that those people might not want to join into the community in the same traditional ways. Conversely, there was some feedback about people who had come into the community and hadn't felt necessarily welcomed and integrated in the way that they might have liked to have been. And the authors also suggested that there was an opportunity of exploring how marae could offer support in terms of social connection, and also how we could support marae going forward in that task as well. Right, so the outcomes so far. So the outcome is that we have research now with some really good information in it, and that information will be used in business and service planning going forward. The information is now available to be shared, and we can share that quite widely and have discussions with other groups around that as well. The project has established a mutually beneficial partnership between ourselves and Manchester House, so that's exciting. And we have developed a shared action plan. It's still in draft, and I'll talk to that next. So the two key areas that came out of the research was that there was, in general, lots of opportunities and places that we could make some gains in terms of community wellbeing. And the other one, there was a really clear theme about the role that digital technology could have in that. And there was lots of advantages of that, but we needed to be mindful that that generation coming through wouldn't become further and further disengaged and therefore disadvantaged by not being able to use this technology. So that is a key focus of the action list that we have put together. So this is quite a long list of draft actions, but I'll just talk you through them. So following up on the Rural Shuttle Initiative, so that's something that we had talked to with Councillor Short about, and we feel that that's important just to see how that's going and working, and it links into the primary concern from the research, which was transport.
I can give a one sentence on that one.
Go for it.
Yeah, briefly, there's been about $100,000 in grant funding awarded. Can't get a vehicle. The proposal was for a new 12-seater van, and we're working in partnership with Courtesy Ford. There's just no new vans coming into the country and very few second-hand ones, so we might have to go back to Horizons and say that we might need to consider a second-hand van and rewrite the business case. So.
Right.
But it really is just supply of vehicle at the moment that's the holder.
Oh, that's great. Well, it's not great. It's great. It's progressing.
Can I say, Councillor Short, I'll have a talk to you later how we sourced our van after the previous one had been stolen late last year, and I'll have a talk to you about that. Okay.
A second draft action is incorporating some of the concerns that were raised by the participants into our tenancy inspections and also into the services that Manchester House delivers, so that we're having those conversations with those people about the things that were raised. Raise awareness and facilitate opportunities for social interactions. And that links back into really some networking between all of the NGOs that were identified, and making sure we're all talking and on the same page and not duplicating services, and that we all have the same information. Developing a network of housing providers was another thing that we talked about. So just working more closely and knowing who's out there working on housing, and also sharing waiting lists if we have people who are high priority and need waiting lists, just working with other entities to be able to find them a home if we can't place them immediately. Considering the research findings and future developments, so that's in our building developments. So I'm looking at mixed tenure developments, co-housing, and just bearing in mind the findings around the changing of the ethnicity and the way households will be in the future. So building that into future developments for us. Understanding how we can support and best use the future library service, because that will have a big role in the digital space as well, and also just spaces in general for that population. We also have talked about considering a central hub in which MCT and Manchester House have shared offices and shared facilities for some services that are held in a physical space, but also looking at how we can provide some outreach services in the future as well. And that's around that continuum of services, so that it's not based around a facility, but making sure people still have access to services in their homes when they can no longer attend. Yeah, consider the role of community navigators and how we can work with them, and also considering some future research and in particular around psychogeriatric and the impacts of the population that at one point in time may have been in institutions and are now aging, and they will need some services in the community going forward. And also Te Ao Māori research as well around community wellbeing. So in the digital space. As I said, digital wellbeing services were a central theme, and there's two particular initial steps that we'll take, and one is determining what digital literacy services are currently being delivered, and looking to see if there's any gaps we can fill there, or just information we can provide from this research to those providers, and also investigating how we can help in terms of digital literacy. So we do have an office and people drop in, and you also have services. And so looking at what wellbeing apps there are, general practice apps, for example, Health Navigator, I'm sure you've heard of it, but it's one of New Zealand's best kept secrets in terms of being the official information for health in New Zealand. So promoting that, and yeah, just generally helping people with health-related technical issues.
Councillor Blackmore has a question.
Oh, yes.
I'm just wondering, in this area, and it might also cover off some kind of connection or connectedness to the community, social connection, whether we've got an opportunity to think about how young people might support in this space.
Yeah.
So we've got our youth council, but there are other groups of young people in the community in kind of leadership roles that might be interested in coming alongside
Yeah.
and being part of this. So I'd just,
actually, that
maybe we
is-
think about that.
Yeah. It was one thing that we had talked about, how easy it is for young people to navigate and support. And we all see this at home, like my father comes around and my son helps him in 3 minutes with something he's been agonising over for about 3 weeks. So yeah, we did talk about actually using youth as part, and that would be part of connectedness as well as
Yeah.
part of helping with.
Yeah, and I'd see it as a win-win because
Yeah.
it's part of young people building understanding and empathy and different things too.
Just quickly, yeah, we actually run a program. Old people want to tell these stories, and we get kids coming in because they've got, I know the technology. They tell the stories to the kids, and they write that.
Yeah.
And that seems to be going really well.
Yep.
So that's the Memoirs project, and it's yeah, it's been an interesting project because you know, obviously they were year 12 and 13 students, because some of the things that that come out in memoirs, obviously there needs to be a certain amount of maturity and sophistication from those particular, from youth. And that's something to be very mindful at, and also the sorts of questions for the older person, you know, yeah, some things don't need to be said. So that's something that we have been incredibly mindful of. And also from a digital point of view and a memoirs project, it can go on for a very long time. And we've actually changed course midway and made some reasonable criteria in sticking to some particular concepts. Otherwise, you know, somebody wants to write, you know, what would be a 500-page memoir, and, you know, which is not particularly suitable. Yeah, so involving youth, there has to be some very good criteria around that.
Yes, I would agree on that. I think if I reflect on some ability to communicate to each other, let alone to an older person who might have hearing issues or whatever. So I think we would prepare people. We do have, in our youth council, we do have people in their early 20s. So there's a slightly higher level of maturity potentially there too.
Yeah.
And so our next steps are sharing that information more widely and talking to some of those NGOs, and also just taking a step back and looking at how these actions align with the regional community development strategy, and make sure we're on the right track, and if there's some things that council would like added into that action list as well. And then setting some priorities and some timelines, and starting to work through those actions.
I think we're particularly conscious that of a research project that was a significant amount of funding that we got from the council. And as a project, there has to be some realistic action points that as part of that outcomes and accountability. And that's something we're certainly MCT and MHSS are very aware of. Not just another piece of paper to be put in a drawer.
Good to hear. Any questions from colleagues? Councillor Underwood.
I've got several questions and a couple of comments. It says up there that it's been put together to be shared with other providers, but in the introduction on page 26, it says that it's confidential and not for public dissemination, which I found a bit concerning, seeing that the ratepayer actually funded it, and it'd be interesting for them to know about it. I can't see the need for secrecy.
Yeah, no, I think they came out of Massey. They had some criteria around that, but we've been back to them and they're happy for that to be shared. It was just put on the research document.
Okay. Can I continue?
Yes.
And the funding also, I think, possibly didn't stretch to proofreading, because there's a couple of well, 3 errors that I found in the numbers. I don't know if you want to make note of them or whether you want me to talk about them now, but the most concerning one was the population statistics, which is page yeah, I'll put my glasses on. It's saying the structure of the population now and the structure of the population in 2030. So it's on page 34. 2018, sorry, 2018 and 2038. So you've got percentages there that exceed 100. So I'm not too sure how that can be.
Yeah, thank you.
I think it's probably because a number of people identify as being a number of ethnicities.
Yeah, well, you've got to stick with one, otherwise it just doesn't. Well, it doesn't make sense. It's totally.
One parent is Pacifica and the other one's European. You can tell because one's German and one's not.
But mathematically, it's just nonsense. And so, you know, if this is an academic report, then
That's a school teacher's perspective, and
well,
we're,
it's
and we're
not.
grateful for it.
It's
But
it's
I
a
know that
normal perspective. I would
it's always
think.
done like this. So this is how it's always is with Stats New Zealand, and there's probably a few maths teachers in there as well.
Yeah, and the other one was they mentioned under communication that that was on page 38, I think. Sorry, no, it wasn't. People who have English as a second language. And in the survey, 12.5% said they were from other ethnicities. Were any of those, do you know, English as a second language?
No, I don't know.
You don't know?
No.
Oh.
Councillor
Because,
Belsky?
oh, sorry.
Yeah, just thanks for coming along, and we want to thank you on behalf of the council too for what you do for our citizens. Just summarising a little bit, communication, it's a real issue. We had a ratepayers meeting in the Kimbolton Hall on roading, and we did extensive advertising or communicating it. And I've talked to 2 farmers since, and they said, "Oh, we didn't know about it." So it is difficult to get to everyone, and also getting together for a chat. Now, Rangawa here, I come from, and we've got a garden club up there. My wife runs or is in it, and she said, "Oh, the garden club's meeting at our place this week." So she said, "Better get out there and tidy the garden up." So I get out there and do all the gardening. It's all looking nice. And there's nothing like having visitors to come to tidy your place up. So, but when they come, they chatted and had a cup of tea, and there was only one person. Look around the garden. I said to Mary, "Goodness gracious me, you know, it's a lot of effort we went through for one person." She said, "Oh, listen, a lot of them come just for the chat," and I think that's really good that they can communicate and chat with each other. The other thing was the bird aviary. I noticed Wanganui Council were wanting to close their bird aviary down, and they had a lot of submissions, and a lot of them were from elderly people who said that they get really lifted up when they go to the aviary. And I myself can't wait to have our aviary back up if we can. Even though it'll be just domestic birds, but at least it's a place where people can go and have that time when they see these wonderful birds and just have that time together. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Belsky. Councillor Underwood, did you have another question?
I was just going to follow up on that reply, but I can't remember what I was going to say now.
Councillor Short?
Thank you. Several comments, if that's all right. Thank you very much for your presentation. It fits in nicely with other work that council has been doing and will be a great lead into the long-term plan. We need to think about how deep our pockets are. There was reference to the Encouraging Change report a couple of years ago, which was also a very good report. Really, why nothing much came out of that one was because no funding.
Yeah.
That's the thing with health and wellbeing services people need to understand around the council table is there's got to be funding, otherwise these things will not happen. Where the funding comes from, whether it's central government, whether it's local government, or through health budgets, funding is really the key. Interesting that a lot of people moving into the region at retirement age. Janine and I went to a social wellbeing forum in Palmerston North some years ago where the author of the Salvation Army National State of the Country's Wellbeing was the guest speaker. And I remember him saying that so many over 65s are still renting now, that their report demonstrated that over the following 10 years, there would be 100,000 over 65s who could not afford to rent in Auckland on their super, so they would be forced to relocate. And I think we're actually, seeing some of that now. So, and just a heads up, I'll come and ask you whether you'd like to speak at an upcoming health and wellbeing group meeting. But the next one's in October if you're interested, so I'll touch base. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Short. Councillor McFadden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your help and assistance. We've just been out into the community as part of our LTP process, and what's really come out of that is communication. And as we've gone around, different areas seem to have different priorities, and we've had regular feedback about the library that it's a waste of money and that people don't use it because they live in the country. But what we really, I guess, need to improve from a council perspective is that it's not just the library, it's a hub. And what's really highlighted out of this is the technology and the information, and that all feeds into the strategy around having the van to bring them in there into the community, so that it's not just, so our challenge really is to get it above a library and get it to what it's there for, and the strategy to actually support those communities and to get them there where there'll be a cafe and they can mix and mingle. But thank you very much for your help. Thank you.
I think it works in very well with this research, that particular project, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Certainly one of the points I picked up is in this increasing digital world that we're in, it does lead to isolation, and I guess the informal type of getting together was that you've mentioned seems to be more important than perhaps the organised, structured approach that we've perhaps been used to in the past. So a lot of food for thought. I think it's a really good report. It's great that the two organisations have worked together collaboratively. Thank you very much. Congratulations to Manchester House on your award the other night. That was a thrill for our community.
Yep.
So if there's nothing else, I will go to page 18, I think it is. And Councillor Short, there is a motion there.
Microphone on. I'd like to move that the District Development Committee receives for information the report commissioned by Manawatu Community Trust entitled Smart Community Wellbeing, Providing Services for Age-Friendly Communities of the Future in the Manawatu.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Belsky. Any discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, great start to our meeting. Right, we move to page 72.
Okay, thank you.
Community Committee projects for the 2023-24 year, and looks like we've got Lynn and Janine to introduce this. Welcome. Oh, it is Lynn, yeah, good.
It's really Janine, actually, for the next few. I'm just sitting beside her,
I
to be
just wasn't sure
perfectly
who-
honest.
Who was behind the mask?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Presented before you is something that we do on an annual basis since we've had our community development strategy, and that is to share with the council through this district development committee a schedule of projects which the community committees have got funding through, and that's through their two budgets of the community committee project fund as well as the community plan implementation fund. So they're attached for your information as in regard, some of those projects are long-standing and they will be familiar certainly for the previous term councillors that are on the current term. They've just been carried forward, and I guess with an appreciation that these groups are volunteers, and so we are reliant on when they've got the time and the capacity to be able to undertake some of these projects. So the report is self-explanatory, but if there's any questions, happy to take those.
Right, we'll open it up. Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. I note the very absent column for Colleton or row of information, and in my efforts to influence getting a new group up and running there, I have had conversations with people who have suggested that there is a backlog of work and opportunity, and I'm just wondering whether we've kind of lost that in the time, or it is actually captured somewhere in terms of the projects that they had prioritised, things like planting, signage, so some work at the hall and pathways, etc.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Certainly they haven't been lost sight of. It's just that there's been no group to confirm what their priorities are.
Okay.
And a lot of those priorities go back to when that committee was first inducted, I guess is the word, first elected. And so I guess the things have moved on. Beautification was certainly one of the number one. And I know the previous chair of that group was working with our roading manager to beautify that corner of Tainui and Colleton Road. But that didn't have any wings. The other priority of theirs was to have a walkway that went from the Ford through to Colleton, and due to, as well as to extend further down Tainui Road. But due to the cost of that, although it's been included in council's walking and cycling strategy, because of the finance and funding would have to be totally 100% ratepayers. It hasn't been a priority for this council.
Okay. On that, I have one more person to pluck off next Monday to see if we can get some leadership. Otherwise, we might need to back to the drawing board on getting a group going.
Thank you. I can just report that Kiwatea are flat tax spending money at the moment, and they're going to have a pretty flash kitchen soon. It's great, and they're so excited about it. It's great. Anyone else? Questions, comments? Councillor Underwood?
Just clarification, is this the $3,000 that they each get, or is it extra to that?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. It is a combination of the Community Committee 3,000, which some of the groups actually want to stockpile so that they can actually spend a significant portion of money for projects. And the other arm, which is the right-hand column of the attachment, is from the Community Committee Implementation Fund for their community plans. And so that's over and above their 3,000, and that's for more significant type projects which council support through other budgets, operational budgets, which could be parks and property or roading.
Thanks.
Councillor Short.
Thank you. I can't remember when we implemented the $3,000 per community committee, about 10 years ago, was it something a bit longer?
A lot longer than that, yes, we're
Um,
sort of talking early 2000s.
Yeah, it really does make a difference, giving the community some funding to take some ownership in their own community. And I think it's great what we see all the community committees doing. And I'm sure why we've got so many now, because the one, perhaps exception of Colleton at the moment, which I need to support Lara with, because those that didn't have them looked at what other communities were getting on and doing, and we want some of that. So it's been very good. Where will we find the dollars that go with this. One of my community committees is waiting to find out what their carryover budget is, so they don't know what's in. With Tangamoana in the hall, they want to know what the carryover was because they wanted to put that into hall repairs and maintenance, but they don't know what the figure is yet.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I understand that we will be, council will be making decisions on the carry forwards in the coming weeks. So it'll be, they will know by mid-September, mid to late September, I think.
Thank you. Right, anyone else? Anything else from you, Janine?
No, Mr. Chair, other than to just support your comment with regards to Kiwatia. They're certainly flourishing in every which way, and it's great to see community in action when it's them that are up there doing the work. And I think Lynn took a picture when they were there for the LTP discussions with them actually up the roof and pulling down the ceiling and doing work, which is just fantastic. This is exactly what community committees is all about, and that's grassroots.
Very good. Right, we have a recommendation on page 72. Someone like to move? Well, I will. Councillor Blackmore, you're welcome to.
Move that the schedule of community committee projects for the 2023-24 financial year be received.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder, please? Councillor McFadyen. Any discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, carried. Thank you, Lynn and Janine. Now we move to page 81, which is community committee minutes, which have been included for our information. Are there any, well, first of all, Lynn, Janine, anything you'd like to highlight for us?
Just through you, Mr. Chair, this is once again another standard report which comes to this committee, and it's for information, the minutes for the various community committee meetings.
We will, if there's, if community, if councillor liaison councillors for the community committees would like to highlight anything specific to their community committee, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, we won't. Otherwise, we'll just move through. Councillor McFadyen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You probably won't have read it, or you may have read it, that in our local Halcombe community, as with all of the communities, they've used the $3,000 to actually make improvements, and it gives them the ownership to actually make those improvements in the hall. But a lot of those improvements really are about their personal time. And I actually have a set of lightweight scaffolding with all the supports and safety equipment that I lent to Halcombe School, and I'm going to say to the Halcombe Hall, and also going to lend it to Bolton. I do wonder whether, if we had some of those sort of basic tools to help them that were pulled that they could use, that whether they actually could do a lot more themselves that, you know, that they're wanting to achieve. And I use a scaffolding as an example where it was like, you know, it's lightweight, it's safe, safety, and they were able to get right up into the hall, roof of the Halcombe Hall and wash it and get rid of the mould and do it all themselves, and they were happy to do that. But without those tools, they struggled to actually really make a lot of them sort of improvements and maintenance.
Thank you, Councillor McFadyen. Kiwatia were talking on Monday about having to buy a $400 ladder, so it's a similar sort of a issue. Councillor Underwood.
It strikes me that the communities have similar issues, and yet I suppose they've got access to each other's minutes through the council website, but I don't know if there's a way that they can collaborate other than that, because I just noticed Starlink, when I was reading Epides, Starlink being dropped into the district in the case of an emergency. So they've obviously investigated that, and that might be relevant to other communities as well. Also, I know Hiwinui were investigating welcome packs, and they're talking here about the rural postie delivering welcome packs, which is an ideal situation because they would be aware of who the new people are coming to the community, and when a place changes hands or when a new place is built, to have the rural postie carrying some welcome packs on board. You know, that's something I think that all communities would pick up as a good idea. And I was also with the radios, I think Rongatia was saying it. That's right, I can talk now. They were saying that they test the radio every Wednesday from the school. So I was thinking Bayanisi, Rangiotu, where is theirs kept now? Because they haven't got a school out there, have they?
Thanks.
They have?
Yep.
At Bayanisi, is it?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there's definitely a school at Banissi, and the idea for our emergency management team to have them at the schools is that it not only gets the kids actually involved, because 9 times out of 10 it's the kids that actually respond on it, but it's also connecting the schools with the community in the event of an emergency. I know at previous years the schools used to be identified as the Civil Defence Centre, but due to Ministry of Education's rulings, they're wanting to get the schools back as quickly as possible following an event to try and give them some normality. So of course that's not the case anymore, but we still see the schools being a good connector for just testing that equipment, which because they're there.
Thank you.
And in answer to your previous questions about connecting the community committees, we have an annual forum that we run here at Council, which is April each year. And one of the topics that was shared was welcoming packs. And so they each asked for a copy of each other's contacts. So they did send an email out to all of the community committee chairs just to get an idea of what's happening in their patch, particularly with welcoming packs. So that's their way of connecting. They've got each other's addresses. We don't facilitate that other than the annual forum where we get them together and we facilitate some core subjects. And one of the core ones, which most of them have experienced, is succession. And that's when they go through a triennium and trying to get new chairs, new secretaries, those sorts of positions. So that's a general problem across all of the community committees, as well as the other things which are quite common. So
yeah,
that answers your.
And also, I suppose it depends on the rural posties and their willingness to cooperate and not charge or things like that as well, because that'll be different, I suppose, throughout.
We've found that most of the posties are really open to the communities with regards to that. From what I've experienced with sending out leaflets, advertising meetings, just giving them a little bit of a koha, which can be a dozen of beer to a box of chocolates, and they're more than happy to do that.
Thank you.
Which of course they're not meant to do, so
No.
just, we're in a public.
A minute there. Yep. Councillor Short.
Thank you. I'll just give 2 brief updates from my 2 community committees. Sanson are doing the community response plan through Vicky with Civil Defence, and the community member that's assisting on that is someone very highly trained in that area in the Defence Force. So that's it's great that Steve's helping with that. What makes Sanson a little bit more unique is as into what other potential hazards and risks is for them. The number one is transportation incidents, either by air or by road. So it's great that we've got someone who works in that space working on that plan with Vicky. Tangi Moana is actually really humming at the moment. Last year it limped along a lot with 4 or 5 people turning up to meetings. Now we're getting 12 or 16. We've got a whole lot of new faces. And the Deep South project has turned a corner. The community actually now get it and are participating and are talking about it. And we've just got 1 or 2 key people in the community. Once they turned a corner, the rest of the community went, well, if he's going to do it, I'm going to do it. So Hillary's making some good progress out there now.
Good, thank you. I just wouldn't mind a steer from Councillor McFadgen's sort of suggestion of perhaps having a central, scaffolding ladder type arrangement, or even just for a bit of research to go into that. Does anyone not think it's a good idea?
Oh, well, can I just add to something?
You can.
Thank you. Yeah, we roofed the Ringawahia Hall a few years ago before all these laws come in, and council supplied the iron, and we got up there and re-roofed it as farmers and saved massive money for the council and made it economic. And I know we approved, I'm pretty sure we did, another machine that lowers coffins down to a funeral director here because of the the increase in deaths, and also the timing of some of the funerals were combined. So that happened, but I think something like that would be good to seriously think about. Yeah, I agree with that 100% myself. But just to add, Apathy, just to add a little bit to it, Mr. Chair, Apathy have got one of the most amazing generators that was at the tavern. They've got it coming over to the Apathy Hall, and they've had the Parks and Reserve up there to make sure the boundary's right and everything, and they can fit it perfectly beside the hall, and it's going to be a real asset to the, in case of civil defence for Apathy. So that's all going well.
Thank you, Councillor Belsky. Councillor McFadgen, then Councillor Short, then Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not advocating we set up whole scaffolding to do buildings. That's a whole new area that's we should stay clear of. What I'm advocating is the scaffolding, like being lent, is somewhere where someone's just washing a ceiling that's 3 meters off the ground and it's no more than 900 off the ground. It's on wheels and it's safe. I'm advocating for light use like that. I'm not advocating wholesale, outside of building stuff, because it's a whole new field. So, yeah.
Thank you.
In fact, I do have, I can send interested parties a link. It's something you've probably seen it sitting outside ITM as you drive past. It's that sort of lightweight stuff that I'm, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Short.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor McFadgen's very generous with his scaffolding. It happens to be at Short's place at the moment. If we were to do something like that, there's health and safety implications. I don't know, Shane might be able to comment on that, but if something was possible, I guess we would be best to talk to rec services and see if there's, some simple things that perhaps they could house that could be loaned out upon request. How far, to what extent that goes would probably be guided by public liability and all that sort of thing. So,
thank you. Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. Yeah, probably building on Councillor Short's comments is that a lot of this equipment can be hired. We would have to factor in the purchase, maintenance, administration, and all of those in that, and it may in fact be cheaper just to hire it.
Thank you. Joe.
Just some balls, those last comments. It's a different world. The council doesn't just get out somebody versus the council being involved and having put everything down. We get tracked through the health and safety obligations as well as obligations as well. But if it's a feeling of the community, want to have a look at it, then we do that. There'll be a capital cost, it won't be much, but it's more the administration of it that we get caught up on.
Thanks very much. Right. Any other liaison councillors wish to highlight anything from their community committees? Councillor McFadgen.
Yeah, just to follow up from the roading meeting, we had a community meeting at Kimbolton. They appreciated it. I think there's some information that we passed on. I passed on to them that really help put it in perspective, like 88% of the rates being spent in the rural areas. Also, the 1%, 450k equals a 1% rate increase for everybody in the community, for all the ratepayers. And I welcome that if they could convince the ratepayers as a whole to spend a lot of money on their roads, I always felt that they could fill their boots and do it. But I think there was some information that we could actually put out that's a little wider, that actually gets a better understanding of actually what the costs are and what the options are going forward.
Thank you. Yeah, it was certainly good information, and we've shared it further afield since, but there's probably still more, potential to do so. Okay. We have a recommendation, I believe, on page 81. Who'd like to move? Nice simple one-liner. Councillor Blackmore.
Move that the District Development Committee receive the minutes from the Community Committee's meetings as listed.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Short. Any discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you. Now we go to the Manawatu District Youth Council minutes, page 188. Right. We'll start with Janine and Lynn, and then Councillor Blackmore may wish to highlight some highlights.
No.
No, through you, Mr.
As
Chair.
read?
Yeah, as read.
Yep. Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. Yes, I will maybe just highlight probably nothing out of the reports, actually, just thinking going forward. A couple of things. We changed the format for the group around their meetings. We took out we were meeting in here, very formal agenda, formal protocols. Nobody spoke. So we've changed that approach to being more informal agenda without some of the, formality of a meeting like this, and moved them to the fielding room. And now we are at the opposite, where we struggle to control a meeting at times. But it's been a really positive move, and we get a lot more out of them in terms of thinking and ideas and working together. So that's been really positive. Over the last couple of weeks, we've had 2 leadership days with the team, and they've done things around kind of personal, professional development, working together, bit of fun, and a few laughs. And every time we do something like that, we actually see a much elevated kind of team, and just getting on and getting things done in a much more cohesive way. In terms of the events, we had the youth market, which I think many of you attended, and there was some discussion through the email, so I think that's been really positive. We had 24 stall holders, all young people, and something like 500 people through the Civic Centre for that day. So it's really positive. Got some things we're going to change going forward with that one, probably slightly different time of day, and a bit more on the entertainment side, because having the Kapahaka group and fielding high school band was really positive. But Sneaky gets more families coming along to support their young people as well, and we thought we could kind of leverage that a little bit more and have more tables and chairs and different things for people to enjoy the day. We have the Young Achievers Awards on the 18th of September. That's a Monday evening in the Civic Centre. The panel are just assessing the applications at the moment to figure out who the winners are. And then the colour run on the 29th of October. The colour run is quite a kind of technical event for them to run and manage. So we've had lots of support from Lynn's team on, how to do that well and safely and make the most of it. And my last point is that recruitment is open for new members of that group. We will have 7 people staying on of the 10. And so we've got a few places there. That's open till mid-September, and we've been advertising quite widely for new members.
Thank you, Councillor Blackmore. It seems to be going really well, and I pick up on your enthusiasm about the change of format. Certainly the market day seemed like a great success. So yeah, well done everyone involved. That's really good.
And certainly, there's a huge amount of work supporting that group from the staff and the council. So,
Yes.
yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. There is a recommendation on page 188. Would you like to move that?
Yep, I move that the District Development Committee notes and receives the minutes from the following 1 or 2 Youth Council meetings: 6th of June 2023, 20th of June 2023, 3rd of July 2023, 17th of July 2023, and the 7th of August 2023.
Which year was that again?
This one.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Short. Discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to page 205. We have the Community Development Strategy Relationship and Liaison Report. That's quite hard to say fast. Janine and Lynn, welcome.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Once again, this is a standard report that comes through to the District Development Committee, and it's there for your information. These are organisations that hold meetings where myself, as well as some of my team members, attend on council's behalf. And so it's just put through for your information. So the 3 that are before you today are the Manawatu Health and Wellbeing Group, the Manawatu Community Trust Wellbeing Committee, and the Social Issues Network Council of Social Services.
Great. Anyone have any questions from reading those reports? Councillor Short will be a fountain of knowledge. You're most welcome.
Thank you. We actually had a Health and Wellbeing Group meeting yesterday, and we did an LTP consultation with them as we've been going out in the communities. And I think the staff will agree the suggestions and holistic approach that we suggested was much higher level than we've been thinking. I mean, much more, holistic than what we've been thinking about how everything links together. So some really good feedback there. We're still waiting our turn, I guess is the right way to say, with the health locality planning. The IMPB, the Iwi Māori Partnership Board, is leading that in this region, and they're doing district by district. And Horowhenua and Tararua are ahead of us, and they're starting to develop theirs, but we will fairly much be next, and we'll probably be working on that by Christmas.
Very good, thank you. Any further questions or comments? We have a recommendation on page 205. Councillor,
No, you go ahead.
Councillor Quigley.
I had the same impressions as you. It was very short.
That reports from community groups be received for information.
Thank you. There's a seconder, Councillor Belsky. Well done. Any further discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, carried. Thank you. Page 226, funding accountability reports through to 9th of August 2023. Janine and Lynn.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I feel like a recorded message here. This is another standard report that comes through to the District Development Committee, and it is in response to our community development policy, where there's certain delegated authority that's been given to assessment panels and to staff to approve funding applications. These are the accountability reports that are required to be submitted following the receipt of funding and after events. So before you today are 3 event accountability reports for Pahongana Hall Committee, the Rural Games Trust, Whana Atahua Beautiful Families Trust, and 2 representative fund accountability reports, which is Lachlan Crate, Jade Eskin, and William Russell. So they're there for your information.
Good, thank you. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. Not on what's been provided. I'm just curious, would we expect applications in the next financial year for at least two of those, Rural Games Trust and the Whānau Atahua Beautiful Families Trust?
Yes, through you,
Okay.
Mr. Chair. They are standard events which council has supported for many years. So yes, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any staff comments in relation to the reports? Councillor Underwood.
Just noticing that Lachlan Crate got into the New Zealand basketball team, so perhaps funding him to go to that under-17 tournament raised his profile a little bit. We never know.
Good point. Thank you. Councillor Short.
Thank you. I think it's really good to see at the moment the community's regained their confidence in holding events. You know, for quite a while there, you couldn't hold them, and then you could hold them, but you needed a plan B because they might be postponed or whatever on the day. And I think largely the community is feeling confident about organising things again, and that there won't be the interruptions that we've experienced the last couple of years. And most of the communities we go to are planning various things over the next 12 months.
Very good. Recommendation on page 226. Would someone like to move? Slightly longer. Councillor Short.
The District Development Committee receives and notes the following accountability reports.
We'll take it. Is there a seconder? Councillor McFadyen. Discussion. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. The contrary, carried. Great. Page 252. Schedule of funding applications through to 9th of August 2023. And it's my great pleasure in welcoming Janine Hawthorne and Lynn Daly to the table.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This report's being brought through to the District Development Committee. It stems from the delegated authority as the community development policy. There's a requirement for reporting all funding applications received and the decisions that were made to this particular committee. So I'll bring your attention to 3.4 of the report, which just summarises the 19 applications which were received during that period, 3 of which were priority services applications, 11 were representative fund applications, and 5 events. So that just adheres to what Councillor Short was referring to earlier in regards to communities wanting to come forward and have that confidence to be able to run events. So the schedule of attached to the report sets out the applicants that were received applications from, their project or event, and the funding that was approved. But one thing to probably bring to your attention is the representative fund. You will see where there's very little left, and that's after the first 2 months of our financial year. So there has been a huge uptake in that funding. So it's just signalling that we will run out of that fund pretty quickly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Underwood.
The 2 ones that were declined because they didn't meet the criteria, is that because they were out of district? The mower Harriers, it said it was Manawatu and Wanganui. I don't know if that was the reason why.
No, through you, Mr. Chair. The reason why they didn't meet the eligibility is that they hadn't fulfilled the requirements for furnishing an accountability report for the previous funding.
Oh, okay.
So for that reason, that's one of the requirements within the policy, that if you don't furnish an accountability report, you cannot be considered for future funding.
Fair enough. And the second one, the YMCA, on the next page, they also were declined. Is that because it was a Palmerston North project?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, that's totally right. There was no evidence within the application that Manawatu residents were actually going to be able to access that service. It was being delivered in Palmerston North for Palmerston North residents. And it's a confusion that we quite often get with organisations. They believe Palmerston North is still part of Manawatu district. So we need to go back to those organisations and say it's the area that's administered by the Manawatu District Council.
Thanks.
Very good. Now, thanks to the team on that panel. We have a recommendation on page 252. Would someone like to move that, please? Councillor Underwood.
The recommendation reads that the District Development Committee receives and notes the schedule of applications received and processed under delegated authority in accordance with the Community Development Policy for the period of 1st of July 2023 to 9th of August 2023.
Thanks very much. Is there a seconder, please? Councillor Belsky. Any discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, carried. Thank you. That gets us through that part of the meeting and take some advice from the Chief Executive, but shall we move to go into public excluded? Happy to do it that way. So let's adjourn for a cup of tea. Thanks very much.
Mr. Chair, can I also acknowledge Janine and her team for all the work that they have done in this space? Thanks, Janine.
Thank you.